Hello everybody, today's video is all about Alfa Romeo. In truth, all Italian car brands are somewhat divisive, but at both the top and bottom end, I think people generally reach a sort of consensus. Ferrari and Lamborghini are seen the world over as very desirable marques. In fact, Ferrari is actually classified on the stock market as a luxury brand, not a car maker. Then you've got at the bottom end something like Fiat, and although it may not be a byword for quality, their cars are generally cheap, cheerful and serve a purpose. The country has also produced some absolutely fantastic cars, ESO, Lancia and so on and so forth. And as a younger man, Alfa Romeo was a brand that I just didn't understand at all. You see, back then I was simply obsessed with the best numbers, the best reviews, the best everything. That's why as soon as I could, I bought a BMW. In fairness, I loved that car and it was very good, an E46 330 Ci Club Sport, and that began a fairly long love affair with the German automobile, one that I think most people in the UK also have. Here in Britain, the Germans are certainly the top dogs when it comes to the executive saloon pecking order. As I've grown older, I've developed an appreciation for cars that maybe aren't the best all-rounders, but have more character, have more excitement, more drama, more passion about them. And let's be honest here, few countries do passion better than Italy. If I wanted to buy sensible cars, I'd certainly go to the Japanese, and when they let their hair down, they do it in a most spectacular fashion, but they don't do it often enough. However, the Italians seem to find a way of building a little bit of flair and excitement into nearly anything. Perhaps one of the most underrated cars that I actually owned was my Alfa Romeo 147. Maybe I didn't appreciate it so much because it replaced a Brera that was not very good. That particular car wasn't a great example, but to be fair, were it, I'd still have quite a few issues. The 147 did its job. It had plenty of room, it was punchy, quite economical, actually had an alright interior. Yes, the switches were a bit dodgy. It was my only vehicle, more or less, for about a year, put about 10,000 miles on it, and it was very good to me. As far as I'm concerned, it was shortly after that Alfa Romeo really lost the plot. It began, I suppose, with the Mito. I'm not sure what that actually was officially replacing because it's smaller than a 147, so it's almost a new model line, and it came out, I guess, a few years after the BMW Mini. It was a cool looking car, and for a young person, it seemed like something very desirable. My sister nearly bought one because they were brand new at the time when she just got her license. We were looking at getting her something nice, new, safe and reliable because she was doing a lot of miles, but it was just far too expensive, so we wound up with something else instead. In fact, a BMW Mini, about the only small car that was even more money. The Mito really should have been something of a warning sign that things were not right at Alfa Romeo. It had a lot of good ingredients, it looked fantastic, nicely specified, the interior was okay too, there were some half-decent engines, but the cars turned out to be chronically unreliable, and upon closer inspection, unless you had the top level interior trim, it was a pretty nasty place. And even then, if you did, there were lots and lots of pieces of iffy plastic, dodgy build quality that hinted at a company more interested in saving money than making good cars. That came out in 2008 and was followed then by the Giulietta, the long-awaited replacement for the 147. You see, one of the things about Alfa Romeo, like many smaller big car makers, is that they have to make their models last a little bit longer. Other manufacturers probably have cars on sale for about 5 or 6 years, whereas Alfa very frequently had them on sale for about 10, and therefore it was going to be very important that it was good. When it was released with a big ad campaign featuring Uma Thurman, everything looked pretty good. The Giulietta on the face of it was, and still is, a very good looking car for your average ordinary humdrum hatch. It also scores quite well in certain key areas. It did very well in safety scores. It also has quite a bit of boot space in it, and that's one of the many reasons that I got my mother to buy one a few years ago. At the time, her first grandchild was on the way, so she wanted a car that she could drive about normally, enjoy, take shopping, but could also have a little bit of fun. And she wanted a nicer badge on it, nothing too upmarket or outlandish, and she wanted a little bit of performance, but didn't want to lose all of the economy. So I bought her one of the later Alfa Giulietta, the QV or the Cloverleaf, whatever they called it. They changed their names a lot. That had the 1750cc engine from the 4C with the twin clutch transmission. Those made about 240 horsepower, were very quick, were very fun to drive. However, the car was chronically unreliable. And that, I think, has been one of the biggest issues plaguing the Giulietta. Every single Giulietta I have ever driven in my life has had problems. That one had issues with the suspension. Okay, maybe not necessarily a design flaw, a maintenance one, but we'll get onto that in a little bit. The DAB radio also on occasion just decided it didn't want to be there. The same with another Giulietta that I drove. The DAB radio, you get in and some days it was just gone. This one, the washer wiper motor has packed up, or something's gone wrong with it because there's loads and loads of washer fluid in it and it will not wash this screen. I've mentioned in previous videos my opinion of Giulietta's build quality, and many of you have told me just how wrong I am. You would like to think that when it comes to something as mundane as a reliability survey, people would all agree, but they don't. In the last few years, Alfa have certainly made improvements, but multiple outlets still found the Giulietta in particular lacking. In 2016, Auto Express ranked it 94th out of 150 cars they tested, commenting that the interior fit and finish was shoddy, with cheap feeling panels bringing the overall feeling down. Car Buyer placed the car 103rd for reliability and 133rd for build quality in a similar survey, also featuring 150 entrants. I never even got to finish the review on my mother's car before we rejected it, because on the day I tried to review it, the front caliper decided to bind itself on, and this was in a car only 4 years old at the time with about 40,000 miles on the clock. I've never felt worried that a Giulietta wouldn't get me to my destination, but in truth, few cars are now that unreliable. Instead, with every single one of them, I've just been playing the game of what's not going to work today. And as far as I'm concerned, if a car's in the garage because the door handle broke, it's just as useless to you as if it's in the garage because the wheels fell off. Yes, one may be more dramatic and dangerous, but both are equally as inconvenient. Perhaps most criminal of all is that despite the fact this was a much more expensive car than the Mito, the interior doesn't really feel any better. There are a couple of very small patches of soft material and that's it. The rest of it, nasty, 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 scratchy plastic, cheap feeling headlining, pretty awful looking steering wheel. The dials are okay, albeit somewhat familiar. That's not really a problem. The switches down here all feel pretty poor. The DNA toggle in particular should be absolutely joyous, and it's just nasty. Alfa Romeo seemed to develop a habit for this, because even in the 4C, which when specified cost about £70,000, it wasn't really any better. In fact, if you wanted leather door cards, they were an option. And that just shouldn't be the case in a car that costs that much. If anything, the dials in the 4C were even worse. But in here, you look down here and you've got acres of horrible, cheap-feeling plastic. It's all bland and boring, and there just doesn't seem to be any sort of zing in here. The only tiny little bit of design flair is that when you turn it on, there's a little graphic of a car driving towards you. When you turn it off, the car drives away. That's about it. There's nothing in here that feels riddled with passion, excitement, anything. Even the high-end Cloverleaf, you had some very, very tiny little nods to Alfa's past. You had this really cool motif on the seats where you had the Alfa logo split between the two of them. That's about it. There's really nothing remarkable. And unfortunately, this seems to have become permanent at Alfa Romeo, because even when the Giulia Saloon came out and it seemed like Alfa Romeo had been given another second chance, the interior once again was just a little bit lackluster. And interiors are one area where previously Alfa Romeo had done so very, very well. The reason I bang on about interiors so much is that if you look at, say, a 159 or a Brera, as flawed a package as they may be, the interiors are absolutely spectacular. They're a gorgeous combination of leather, brushed aluminium, little details that you absolutely fall in love with. And then with this, it seems like they just went, nah, can't be bothered anymore. And that's never, ever a good sign. As the 159 and Brera faded away, this car took over from both of them, meaning it had to fill the role for quite a few different people. The fact that Alfa never really seemed to be that interested in putting a nice interior in here really is a sign of the way the company viewed the model, and maybe its customers too. It's certainly not all bad for the Giulietta. As I said, they look very good. They are quite practical. They've got quite a bit of room in them. They were fairly safe. They've got a decent range of engines with an excellent choice of diesels that were pretty good for the time. Some nice petrols too. The slightly hotter 1750. You could have a manual gearbox, which would be a 6-speed and is actually pretty decent. You could have a twin clutch box, which actually was okay. And they're quite good to drive. This particular car has been loaned to me by Sports Italia. I am currently driving down to them to collect my Maserati. Itself, another very flawed car with a rather nice interior. Please don't see this video as a review of this particular Giulietta. It's not. I'm just using it as a backdrop, and it's been a very, very faithful companion. In fact, with a fuel crisis ongoing, I am very, very grateful for its parsimonious attitude towards fuel. The thing barely drinks any at all, and it's got a decent sized tank, which means it's got a very good range as well. This is the base model with the smallest engine on offer. It's 105 horsepower, 1.6 litre diesel. Not a very pleasant thing to use because it's got nothing low down, then suddenly gives you a bit of a spike of torque, and then it's done. So it's not particularly pleasant. However, the car itself is an utter joy to hustle. You've got pretty quick steering, very darty, almost Ferrari-like steering in fact, and the suspension really begins to make sense when you get a wriggle on. The car on a country road will put a big smile on your face. It really, really will. So in some ways I'd be willing to overlook the interior not being quite up to scratch. But then you come to the killer blow. Alfa Romeo dealers. Now, I've not had many direct dealings with Alfa Romeo main dealers, but I did deal with a well-known London-based Alfa Romeo specialist who supplied my mother's car. They were useless, absolutely useless. The car had a knock when we test drove it. They said they'd fix it. We picked it up. The knock was still there, took it back to them. They said they sorted it, and when I came back it was knocking again, and they said, oh well, we only sorted the knock on that side because that's the one we thought you wanted done. We left the knock over there. I have said to many of my friends that they should try a Giulia Quadrifoglio when they were new. A very, very cool thing, nice alternative to an M3, and many of my friends tried. 3 of them tried to get a test drive with an Alfa dealer, but they didn't even get as far as getting there because they were so unbelievably difficult to work with and deal with. They just couldn't be bothered. Most dealerships have the good graces to be decent with you up until the point where you've spent your money, but Alfa seem to want to just skip that stage and go straight to treating you like dirt. That's just not acceptable. For a smaller brand with not as many dealers as others, it's really not good enough to have any dealers being bad. And I know people will already be typing, oh well, that's not Alfa's fault. Yes it is, yes it is. If your name is above the door of a place, it's your responsibility to make sure that it's conducting business in the way that you deem appropriate. That's just how it is. Same thing with McLaren. When we were dealing with McLaren Manchester a couple of years ago, no, it's not maybe Woking's fault, but it's Woking's responsibility. If it says McLaren above the door when you walk in, they are representatives of McLaren. Exactly the same for Alfa Romeo. And Alfa Romeo dealer standards across the board are absolutely hideous. I'm not sure I've ever had a positive story about an Alfa Romeo dealer, and that is really, really tragic because a little bit of dealer help, a little bit of goodwill, a little bit of friendliness, the odd smile, the odd freebie goes an awful long way to building some goodwill with your customers and can make up for a sometimes lackluster product. Alfa, though, just didn't really seem to care. When I did last walk into an Alfa Romeo dealership, it felt like it was a building site. In fact, it wasn't. They weren't doing any work. The place was just dead. It was depressing. I mean, really, seriously, it was not a sort of place you felt like you wanted to buy anything from because you thought that in 2 weeks they probably weren't going to be there. It'd be houses. you'll get with this car fleeting but genuine moments of brilliance. You'll go through a set of bends and you'll go, you know, I've got a massive smile on my face. This is fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. The stereo is actually quite good considering it's an unbranded, no-name, base-level jobby. It's quite nice. No, it doesn't have anything fancy. It's got Bluetooth in here, which is an optional extra and is really weirdly done through the menu on the display here, not through the radio over here, but well, Alfa, that's Italians. See, that sort of stuff I can put up with. That's fine because that's just Italians being weird and Italian. That's perfectly okay. But you've then got to have something on the flip side. You've got to say, but the steering in it's the best and the nicest thing ever, and the interior is lovely and luxurious, and yes, okay, it farted at me every 3 days, but it was absolutely glorious the other two. This, not so much. There's just not enough in it to make it a car that I think is worth the time or the money for the majority of people. And then after this, the Giulia was definitely a step in the right direction, but unfortunately that car has now been canned, and now Stellantis own the place. I'm pretty sure every single car we see from Alfa Romeo after this is just going to be some sort of fairly faceless cookie cutter thing. And that's a real shame, because when it comes to ordinary cars, Alfa Romeo seem to have this knack for building them in such a way that they're just far more special than they have any right to be. With this, I feel like they gave up. Anyway, there's a little rant from me. Would love your feedback, your stories. Perhaps you disagree, perhaps you agree. Get down in the comment section, tell me what you think. For now, thank you for watching. Please like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.